Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to You Are What You Read. This President's Day, we are joined by a presidential speechwriter, a political commentator, a talk show host, and New York Times bestselling author, Chris Matthews. Chris is the author of Bobby Kennedy, A Raging Spirit, Jack Kennedy, Elusive Hero, Kennedy and Nixon, The Rivalry That Shaped Postwar America, and Hardball, How Politics is Played, told by one who knows the game. Now, Chris definitely knows the game, and he also knows the ins and outs of the great Irish-American politicians who, in many ways, changed the course of American history. Chris was both a presidential speechwriter and a top aide to Speaker of the House, Thomas P. Tip O'Neill, Jr. For a generation, he hosted Hardball with Chris Matthews on MSNBC, which is now exclusively on Substack. Today, Chris joins us to talk about his latest book, and I loved it. It's called Lessons from Bobby, 10 Reasons Robert F. Kennedy Still Matters. Fitting for today's holiday, this is a conversation about former presidents and key political figures in history. We also do a little bit of a dive into the movies and the effect that entertainment has on the political climate. And we also talk about the people that write. So today, Chris Matthews begins our conversation recognizing the folks you never see, but whose messages you take in, former presidential speechwriters.
Well, let me just tell you, just in terms of former presidential speechwriters, there's a bipartisan group of us. It's called the Judson Walker Society. We're named after the guy who wrote speeches for Warren Harding. He was the guy who was presumed to have written Return to Normalcy, that great line.
Yeah.
About the end of World War I. We've got a group of people, bipartisan again, all the way back to Eisenhower. And last fall, a fall ago, we ran a big dinner, and we got Doris Kearns Goodwin to speak to the group, as well as everybody else. Every one of the presidents got a speaker. I organized all this, and they talked about their memories from working for that president. And I always tell people, tell us something we can't hear on television. Don't repeat your Holy Communion breakfast speech. Nobody wants to hear that. In fact, nobody wants to hear that because they can tell by the rendition of it that they've heard it, that it's been said a million times before. Tell me what
I'm just gonna put 10 cents on the table as a bet that Peggy Noonan memorized hers, and it's on tap.
No, she didn't speak, but we had another guy, one of her other speechwriters. She recommended Elliot. So all the speeches are all different. Some of them are really good. And then Doris Kearns talked about her husband. Now, I want to talk to you about Richard Goodwin.
Yes.
Wrote the following speeches. He wrote the We Shall Overcome speech for Lyndon Johnson. This is the one that advocated for the Voting Rights Act. And Johnson, of course, never admitted that he had a speechwriter, which is perfect for Johnson. He belittled, when somebody asked him about Richard Goodwin, he belittled the guy. As some staffer, it was like a line out of Lawrence of Arabia. I had some minor functionary in Jerusalem somewhere. And then he wrote the Bobby Kennedy Ripples of Hope speech in South Africa. That was Richard Goodwin's. He wrote Ed Muskie's speech in 1970, which Muskie gave against Nixon in that midterm election, which Muskie was much applauded for. And then he wrote Al Gore's concession speech.
Wow.
So Richard Goodwin is probably right up there with Ted Sorensen as one of the people we all look up to. So we had Doris talk about him. But she's got a whole book about him, An Unfinished Love Story.
Yes, I have it. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, well, she's amazing.
She is amazing. I mean, everything she writes is so beautifully researched. I had a view of the Johnson presidency that was pretty much shaped by my schoolwork, not by what was real. And then Doris would talk a lot of times on Morning Joe, but she would talk about him and then wrote about him. And he's a completely different character than he appeared to be in public.
Yeah.
To me,
Well,
do you
she knew
feel?
him as well as anybody. There's no doubt that she was inside the family. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. And
So
so
she
that's a
knew everything.
different thing. Yeah. Yeah.
No, she told the story that Johnson told, which is, I think, a classic example of political retail. We're all used to wholesale, television, radio, whatever. But retail, LBJ, when he checked into the Dodge Hotel, which is right near Capitol Hill, it's where I did Hardball for most years, that same street corner. The old hotel there, that old hotel had about 75 top aides to congressional people, Congress persons, all living in a big rooms and hallways and a bathroom at the end of the hall and the whole thing. Johnson went in there the first night and brushed his teeth about 5 times. Then he got up the next morning and took 7 showers. And the whole goal was to meet as many people as he could. And in 3 months, he was elected the Speaker of the little house, a staff job. He was a total inveterate retailer. That's how he met, person at a time. When he got elected to the Senate in '48, he immediately looked up, what's his name, the guy who worked in answering the phones. Billy, what's his name? God, I can't remember the guy's name. He was anyway. He was the guy that basically got in trouble later on. But Johnson wanted to know who the big shots were. He wanted to know because the guy who answers the phones in the cloakroom knows all the girlfriends, knows everything, knows everybody's habits, when they have to get home. They always say, "When are we getting out of here? When are we getting out of here?" That was the standard house question. When are we getting out of here this week? And they always go to the guy in the phones. And so that was Johnson's buddy. Johnson was always conniving that way.
Yeah, but that you could call it conniving, and of course it is, but it's hugely political. But it's also it's one of the requirements of the gig.
Well, in the Senate, you have to know where the power is and who to make friends with. And Johnson would go to that guy from Georgia and go to his house every Sunday and read the newspaper with him because he was a single guy. He didn't have a life at home. He couldn't wait for Monday morning. The guy lived for Monday morning. Please let the Senate come back in so I can live again. And he would go hang out with him and let him just read the papers with he and his wife. And it was his way of just building this power base. And it was his power. By his first term as a senator, he was elected Democratic leader. Johnson was. And then
but I also understand he was incredible with his constituents, with real people. He was charming.
He worried about, he would say, give a big speech and make it general. And then he'd say, what about chicken prices? And they forgot to mention that. He wanted all the details. You're right.
But see, that's where we'll get to Bobby, because there is in Bobby Kennedy, even though he comes from a very famous family and he's the runt of the litter of all these amazing young men and women, he had an affinity, a love for the underdog. And that really comes through in your book, which I thought was so beautiful, that we're not just shaped by our families, but we're shaped by our own perception of our family.
Well, that's my old favorite expression. You don't make your children, you meet them.
Wow. That's beautiful.
And people don't understand that. You have to meet each one of your kids separately, and you're introduced to them by them, and oh, this is a new person I know. It's called your kid, because they are an entity to themselves, and you did not make them. But Bobby did things like when he was at Harvard, he hung out with the jocks. He was at the varsity club, not the elite clubs, the social clubs. He didn't like them. The priest, Father Leonard Feeney, who was preaching in Harvard Square and had a church there of some kind, was preaching there's no salvation, no going to heaven outside the church. So he heard this, and he went to his father and said, this can't be true. But it actually was sort of true anyway in those days. That's what the church did basically preach. But he got the Cardinal, his father called it Cardinal Cushing of Boston, and got told Cushing that this guy was saying, if you're Jewish or whatever you are, you're not going to make it because you're not in the church. And Cushing got the guy basically on the road to excommunication for about 30 years. So Bobby was, and he had Ralph Bunche,
Sure.
the Nobel Prize winner, who had put together the first, treaty in the creation of Israel. He had him speak down at the University of Virginia Law School, where Bobby was going. And Bunche said, I'm not speaking to a segregated audience. Now, this was not the Virginia of today. It was Virginia of those days, which was Jim Crow. And the state law said no integrated audiences.
That's right.
But he went to the president of the school, Colgate Darden, and said, this guy's not going to speak to a segregated audience, so you better change the rules for tonight. And he did. He got it changed so there'd be an integrated audience down there. So Bobby showed signs of being what you'd call a modern day liberal long before he became a liberal in many ways as Attorney General, which he really clearly did.
This book is so beautiful, Lessons from Bobby, 10 Reasons Robert F. Kennedy Still Matters. Because you show or demonstrate on the page his intellectualism equal to his heart. A man of his time, born in 1925. So with 1925 comes all of his perceptions of the world around him, whether it's the role of women, the role of a church or a faith, or the role of a country. But there's an education here. He's classically educated, which I think you were too, Chris.
Okay. Well, look, Jackie Kennedy was not a political person. She had some instincts. She said that Bobby was the least like his father of any of his sons or daughters. The least like his father. Now, I would take that as a credential, that he wasn't like Joe Kennedy.
Right.
Because he wasn't anti-Semitic to start with. He was a very positive guy. And,
but there's this sense that he took of his time, what he read. I mean, there's everybody from Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine, Shakespeare, Robert Frost, the traditions that kind of the backbone of American philosophy and intellectual philosophy. And it's ribboned through everything he did, a belief system.
Yeah, and also he's experiential, because incremental, because his friend John Siegenthaler was his administrative assistant, his top aide, and he assigned him to go follow the Freedom Riders of 1961. Now, he was against the Freedom Riders in the beginning because he thought it would just stir up racial trouble. And initially he thought this will just make us look very weak in the face of the Soviets. But he sent Siegenthaler down to Alabama with the buses, and he walked into this big crowd of white people who were horrendous looking people. And they banged him over the head with a metal pipe and let him lay in the street for a while. And then only then did the police, after a while, take him to a hospital, only after a while. And that was not his idea of justice. And Harry Belafonte, who was very much a follower of the civil rights movement, in fact, an advocate of it, who said that he thought that really changed Bobby. It was the fact that John Lewis said this too, that Bobby really had someone close to him who had been harmed by the haters of civil rights. And that really changed him. He had to have that experience, a personal experience, as well as the intellectual. And but you said before about his writing of speeches. When Jack Kennedy was meeting in June of 63, after all the hell that went on in Birmingham, Alabama, the school kids all having fire hoses and dogs set on them when they were demonstrating and all that going on, he was the one that was with Jack in the Oval Office. And he said to Jack, we've got all the material for a speech. We've got a lot of the speech already written. Now, I saw this in the Robert Drew documentary, a rare case of where people with a camera actually got into the Oval Office in that documentary. And you can actually see Bobby prepping telling President Kennedy, we've got this speech ready. And then Kennedy got the idea, after watching, I guess, some television that day, I'm going to give this speech tonight. So Jack Kennedy called up the networks and said, I want to give my speech tonight on the networks. And in those days, that was such a big deal that Kennedy got the airtime. And right up until delivery time, right up until he had to deliver the speech with the teleprompter, they were working on the speech. He and Ted Sorensen, Bobby and Ted Sorensen. So they wrote the speech. But it's a hell of a speech. I mean, when he talks about civil rights, human rights, going back to the scriptures, to the Bible, and how it's as American as the Constitution, a great phrase there, as old as the scriptures and as American as the Constitution. And he gave that incredible speech for civil rights, for public accommodations and the whole works, all of it, everything we think about as civil rights. Martin Luther King said afterwards, that white man has just hit the ball out of the park. That white man.
Wow.
And to him, it was a novelty that a white guy would do it, but he did.
You worked for so many fabulous leaders. I want to hear what you believe or thought about Jimmy Carter, because I think he's kind of a saint.
Well, he was honest. He was a moderate to conservative Democrat. He was a pacifist, I think. I don't think he wanted to use the military, period. I just don't think he ever wanted to do it. He took pride in the fact that there were no combat casualties in his administration. Well, then why do we have a freaking army? I mean, you can't say the goal was to never use it ever. I mean, you have to have some occasion to use it. But I think he did believe that. I think he when the hostages were taken, I don't know how he could have saved his administration on that account. I mean, right. Reagan did something very smart. When the air traffic controllers went on strike, they pulled a wildcat strike against their own contract. He fired them all. And that sent word to the Russians, to the Soviets, that this guy's a man you have to deal with, that this is not Jimmy Carter. So I think the only way that the Ayatollah could have gotten Carter's message effectively was to deliver it some other way earlier on. Once the hostages were taken, it was a matter of pride for that country to hold on to them. And it was very hard to win an argument with them. But I think you had to somehow scare them ahead of time, scare the hell out of them, that they wouldn't have, that if Jimmy Carter got on the phone and said, I want those hostages back in the 24 hours or your country's going to pay for it. But Carter became so obsessed with the life of those hostages. He thought they were more important than America. He thought getting them back alive was more than anything in the world worth. So he put up with everything. He said we were not going to invade or do anything as long as they didn't hurt the hostages. I mean, he basically made it about the hostages. I don't think Reagan would have done that. I think
Chris,
Reagan,
in your opinion, do you think, you don't think Reagan would have handled it that way? And obviously he didn't, because he got him, right? He was elected and then the hostages came home.
Right.
But my question is, do you think that Jimmy Carter was in that intense bubble of the presidency, couldn't see outside the bubble in that instance?
No, I think he was a Christian, literally. I think he felt that if he took any steps that led to the execution of those hostages, he's responsible for it. I mean, he was literally a Christian. I mean, he would say, how can I kill these people to make my presidency look stronger? Because he believed that anytime if we dropped a bomb offshore from Iraq, anything we did, any action we took, he said this, if we took any action, they could kill the hostages. He was obsessed with them. He became friends with the families. I mean, I know it's awful to say this because they are human beings and they were serving their country. But he got so wrapped up. Remember, he went over after Reagan won and went over and relished being with them. Like it was a total victory of some kind. I think it was. I can say this brutally. It was narrowing of his thinking. Somehow he should have let them know this is our country against your country, buddy. Ayatollah, whatever you call yourself. This is our country, and my country's not going to stand for this. You got it? We're just not going to take it. I mean, maybe today would be dropping all kinds of stuff on that country, but it would have made them. Well, today we would just put today Reagan or Trump would eyeball the Ayatollah and figured, I know what apartment you live in. I know where you're going to Buddy Biden or Betty by tonight, and you're going to die. He would just say that to
Yeah.
him.
Oh,
So,
sure.
yeah.
Jimmy Carter, when you look at how he conducted himself when he left office, he didn't start a production company and go to Hollywood. He didn't get an agent. He wrote these beautiful books.
Yeah, it's
And
himself on his laptop. I mean, he really did. He
and
typed them.
thank you for giving him credit, because we're talking about the Ted Sorensens and the Richard Goodwins and the Doris Kearns Goodwins and the Chris Matthews and the people that write about the political sphere. But he wrote about being a good human being. And when you look at Habitat for Humanity and really study it, it's one of the most successful hands-on charitable giving organizations in the world.
Well, I went down there with him to Tijuana, and I slept on rocks. I slept on something very uncomfortable on the floor, on the ground. But when I watched Rosalind Carter walking around with 2x4s and a nail apron on, and I mean, she was actually, this is not a PR stunt. These two people actually were builders of those cheap houses, and they would build up like a house a day, kind of, pretty much.
Amazing.
And they were inspiring.
Rosalind's a beautiful writer too. Her autobiography is a beauty. It's really one of the great ones. And she also, Chris, do you remember, she was pilloried for wearing a cloth coat? I mean, what is it? What is this that they have to be, these first ladies have to be glamazons? What is that?
What about today?
I mean, you got to be a supermodel.
This is not off. This not off the rack. Not off the rack.
No, not off the rack ever. But there's a difference between in history how that role changed, and then Betty Ford with her great contribution that's ongoing to alcoholism, to solving.
Yeah, well, I think it's so true, and I'm always amazed about. I mean, I quit drinking completely 31 years ago, cold turkey. And I didn't join the program either, which all my friends have. I didn't have to, but I would do it in a minute. But I think there's a lot of booze in politics. There used to be a lot more. And, Wilbur Mills was walking around drunk all the time and chasing after showgirls. And it was pretty clear to me, because he had that look, that morning after look that you can spot in drinkers, which is they always comb their hair perfectly. They always have a neat tie on, and you know that they're hungover to death, that they're just dying underneath. But they make it look like they're so pretty. And you go, come on, buddy, I know what's going on inside you. But Wilbur Mills.
Well, that's because the Wilbur Mills and that whole in history, it's a club up there. Now
it used to be a club meeting in the Board of Education room in the House side with the speaker peeing in the sink and all that stuff. It was it was the boys' club. It really was the boys' club, and that was going pretty much when I was there. But Tip didn't have that, but he had a couple of buddies, that Rostenkowski, Jack Murtha, who were his buddies, and I'd see the real smile on his face. Tip had a real smile, and he had a political smile, which was, the political smile was for everybody. The real smile was a crackling, laughing, best friends. I'm happy as I can ever be with these guys around me. He loved the dinners and hanging out with guys. He loved them.
Do you feel that your career and the path you took after the Peace Corps, because I would like to talk to you about that for a moment, after the Peace Corps, do you feel that Tip O'Neill directly impacted the way you viewed things and the way you unspooled your career?
Well, there's no doubt that from the time I went to work for Tip the speaker in 1981 through 1987 was the toughest political life I've ever had. I had to be perfect. He won 50 straight elections. He didn't allow for mistakes. If it was a mistake, it was made, you made it. You got it? Mm-hmm. You made that mistake. I didn't make it. You made it. And I felt that pressure. And I certainly wrote a book called Hardball back in '88, which has a lot of the rules I learned from him that people like to be asked. People like to be asked. You like to be thanked, and they like to be thanked. Ask them for their votes. Thank them for their votes. Be very aware of that person,
Mhm.
and don't assume people because you cut their lawn or you shovel their driveway, they're going to vote for you. And he said, you got to ask them. And that's his favorite story, Mrs. Sullivan or Miss O'Leary or whatever it was he talked about all the time. And the woman had said, I voted for you even though you didn't ask me, Tip. You didn't ask me. And he says
Wow.
people like to be asked.
As it goes in the ancient tradition of storytelling and art, we find the truth. Chris Matthews tells us about what we can glean from the great films and filmmakers of history. And as we enter into Oscar month, I find his comments very interesting.
I saw a movie the other night. 5 came back about the 5 American film directors like Frank Capra and George Stevenson.
It's incredible.
Right.
And so is the book. The book is a page turner.
Well, it's about what they saw. And they said when you first looked at Hitler, you thought he's a clown. But look what he was doing. And then you look at what George Stevens uncovered in the camps. The horror of the Third Reich is horrible, horrible, horrible. Every sight of every scene of every camp, you go, I can't believe these people did it. And it wasn't just the leader; it wasn't just the top guys.
Right.
The typical guard at these camps was shooting people as the Allies arrived. As the Allies were coming over the hill, they're shooting people trying to escape. How can they have much that evil? And each one of them had that evil. It's a horrendous portrait.
And even bringing this up, Chris, is so essential to your book because Bobby was very close to George Stevens Jr. And
Yes.
What we know about George Stevens, one of the greatest American film directors in history, just unbelievable. But his career changed when he came back from that war. He was doing light comedies and having a ball. And then he began to grapple with the deep American themes. That had to have had an effect on George.
So what's your favorite movie? Place in the Sun or Shane or Gunga Din? Which one? There's a secret to every George Stevens movie. You know what it is?
What is it?
At some point in the movie, near the end, he shows one of the bad guys as really great, as surprisingly a good person. In Gunga Din, it was the Mahdi. It's one of the thugs who turns out to give up his life so that he couldn't be taken prisoner. It's Chris Calloway who comes to him before the big shootout in Shane and says it's a stacked deck. I'm getting out of here. Chris Calloway. Ben Johnson.
I don't know.
And then the other one is Elizabeth Taylor, who comes to him at the end of Place in the Sun when he's in prison and brings her father with him and says, I will love you my whole life. It is an amazing statement from you think it's just a rich girl.
How about Giant, the adaptation of the great Edna Ferber novel? That is so deeply about racism. And it's not a lot of people just refer to the love story between Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor, but it's deeply, deeply about Texas and brown people and white people. I mean, Ferber was the one.
Yeah.
How about he did The Greatest Story Ever Told? That was the first movie I saw. How about The Diary of Anne Frank?
I was just over there. I was just in her house. And in Frank's
what
house.
What was that like?
Well, it's built up for tourists, of course, but you could actually go into the rooms and where they lived up to the 3rd floor. And somebody ratted them out and said there's Jews living in that house. And again, it's a classic example of the Nazis right to the very end looking for people and burning and destroying them, killing them. Like it wasn't like it was a bad idea. They followed it all the way to the end of the war, killing people. Hitler said, I'm not going to let the Jewish people survive the war. He knew he was losing after Stalingrad. He knew he was going to lose. And he said, I'm going to make those people are all going to be dead. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. But Chris, when you sit back and look at all this, and then I'll let you go because I could talk to you for 3 days. But when you look at this, I mean, just look at the interconnections. George Stevens Jr. became a producer and a director himself, and he did the Kennedy Center honors.
Yeah.
In the halcyon years of the Kennedy Center honors. Gone now. He was besties with Bobby, who you wrote so beautifully about. It's almost as if there is, and then the father, George Stevens Sr., gave us some of the greatest American movies of all time, comedy and drama, some of the most beautiful images that endure. Do you notice we're talking about the same group of people over and over again somehow? Do you see
Yeah, I
that,
think
or do
I
you
talk
just think
about
about it?
women's rights too. I think Katharine Hepburn is the best, and Betty Davis. I just love them, and I know they're all wartime heroes, but I got to tell you, uh, Katharine Hepburn, Woman of the Year, that started it all.
Great film, great
And
film.
I'm absolutely. I did this thing. I wrote this column once about Irving Berlin, who died when he's 101 or 102, and Betty Davis died the same month.
Hmm.
So I wrote a book. I wrote a column about Irving Berlin. I said, Irving Berlin, there's something most people don't know about him. He couldn't read music. He
Hmm.
couldn't write music. He just wrote the best movies, or the best songs ever known.
Hmm.
God Bless America, every song in the world. What do I do? Every song in the world. And he was thinking of learning how to read music and write it. And somebody said, no, that'll kill your ability to create music. And then I looked at Betty Davis. I said, Betty Davis, she's an all right looking person, of course, but she didn't look like a movie star. She didn't look like a Grace Kelly or somebody. She didn't look like that. But she made herself into the greatest movie star there was of women, a female star. She was the best because she was the greatest movie star. She just
Hmm.
was. She played the parts like Watch on the Rhine. Go watch on the Rhine. One of the great movies. Uh, and
I agree.
and you can
I agree. I just want to make sure you know this before I let you go, but you know that women started the film industry in the United States.
okay.
It was Anita Luce, Frances Marion, Edna Ferber, June Mathis. June Mathis created the screenplay format that we still use today. She directed Ben-Hur in Rome. Didn't get
The
credit for it. The
original. The
French,
original.
that is correct.
Did you
She
see
died.
Hamnet? Did you see Hamnet yet?
I haven't seen the movie yet, but I
It's
talked to Maggie, and
fantastic.
I had her on the show. So
It was
I
fantastic. I just saw it last night. It's
I can't
fantastic.
wait. I
It's
can't wait for
fantastic.
that. Have what else are you watching that you're loving?
Well, I want to watch what's the one? The new one with Stelton Sarsgaard. Uh, I forget the name of it, but it's a great movie. It's right down the street here. I got to go see it when tomorrow. I think
Mhm.
tomorrow I get to see it.
Did you get to see the Springsteen biography?
Yeah, I thought that was okay. I thought it was okay.
Was it too
I,
small for you? Was
no,
it
no, biopics are very tricky because nobody's life is heroic. Nobody's life has the arc of the American hero. I mean, Winston Churchill, yes. Jack Kennedy, yes. We begin with heroic physical heroism. You do something in warfare. Ernest Hemingway, and then you become wiser when you get older. There is that sort of heroic pattern that but very few lives are fit like that. They're just lives are much trickier
They
than
sure are.
screenplays.
They sure are. I want to thank you for writing this incredibly beautiful book, and I'm putting it in the hands of as many readers as I
Thank
can.
you.
And we
Thank
always
you.
appreciate you.
Thank you so much.